The Big Sky has been a staple in the worship space for a while now, and for a good reason. Between all the reverb algorithms and parameters, there's what feels like an infinite number of ways that you can use it. But this can be equally as overwhelming as it is inspiring. So today I just want to walk through my workflow and how I use the Strymon Big Sky in a live worship context and how to get the right tones at the right times. So despite the massive amount of options that the Big Sky has, today I just want to focus on 3 of the algorithms that I find myself using the most. And that's going to be the bloom setting, the plate setting, and of course the classic cloud setting. As far as what my workflow looks like, I'm a simple guy. I'm a really big fan of simplicity on my pedal board. I just don't want to be so wrapped up and focused on tap dancing and banking and making all of these changes on my board constantly so that I'm more focused on my pedal board than I am on my worship. So for each of these settings, I really like to have every option that I might need for a Sunday morning set all on one bank. So typically I'll have my first preset saved to be a little bit more dry. This can usually fill more of a rhythm roll or just a more dry tone that doesn't need so much reverb to it. My second preset is usually kind of my classic lead tone. So this is going to have a little bit more wetness and usually kind of my always on for more lead stuff. And finally, my third setting is usually the most wet. This is typically just going to be for swells or moments that are just really ambient. So let's go ahead and jump into the bloom setting first. This is probably going to be the most straightforward and natural sounding reverbs that I use. Now, the cloud presets are basically going to take everything that we just heard and dial the wetness up just a little bit more. This is going to be really great if you find yourself playing lead a little more often. It's going to sound a little more kind of breathy, kind of that like Bethel style reverb. And these will be great if you just need the effect of the reverb to be heard just a little bit more. By the way, I do want to mention that I will have all of these reverbs available for download at the link right down here below. So feel free to go check that out if you want to pick these up for yourself. The cloud setting is probably my favorite to use, so much so that I actually built another bank also using the cloud setting, and I've called these float. And the float presets are definitely my favorite to use right now. Probably 90% of the more recent videos that you've seen on the channel are featuring the float sounds. So for these, I've definitely targeted them a little bit more for the player who's playing lead pretty much every Sunday, where if you imagine most of these, the scale from dry to wet between the three presets is pretty wide. For the float pack, I've basically taken that scale and scrunched it down a little bit more. So float 1 is definitely going to be like a very usable lead sound that probably falls more in line with the second setting on a lot of the ones we've already talked about. But from there, float 2 is just going to dial that up a little bit more. It'll give you a little more juice when you need it. And then float 3 is also, it's not going to be as intense as some of the other swell settings. And it's got kind of a nice balance to it where you can still hear the pick of the note, but it's also wet enough where you can use it for swells as well. Now we've saved the most ambient tones for last, and that is going to be the plate settings. I would compare these closest to the float settings that we just heard, but it does take everything up another notch, and it's got this really nice modulated tail at the end of the reverb. So definitely be sure to be listening to that as I let some of these notes ring out. You'll hear some of that modulation come in, which sounds really, really nice. Now, like I mentioned, I will have a link right down here where you can pick these up for yourself. So feel free to go check those out. Hit me with any questions that you might have, and I will see you in the next one.